Page 50.
Wait, what happens if we all see this here?
Last week, we saw how God brought his people out of slavery in Egypt. First of all, there were 9 plagues, really each of them more destructive than the previous one. And after each of them, Pharaoh said, no, I'm not letting the people go. But then God brought the 10th plague. What was the 10th plague?
Every firstborn son.
Every firstborn son in Egypt, including among the animals, was killed. God gave a way, though, for his people to be delivered from that. What was that?
The Passover.
The Passover. And what were they to do to celebrate the Passover?
Eat a lamb.
Okay, they were to take a lamb. What kind of lamb?
Flawless.
Yeah, flawless.
A 1-year-old male.
A 1-year-old male that was without blemish, flawless. They were to sacrifice it,
Roast and eat it.
roast and eat it. And what were they to do with the blood?
Put it on the door frame.
Put it on the door frames. And so when the angel of death, attention up here, Kingston. When the angel of death came, he passed over those houses that had the blood on their door frames. What was that to be a picture of? Daylin.
Used to be a picture of, like, showing that there's,
Who did it point ahead to?
that they're not Egypt.
Jesus.
Lay it.
And his blood on the.
His blood on the cross. Pointed ahead to Jesus and his blood on the cross.
I didn't know what that meant. Like,
So after that plague now, Pharaoh had enough. He wanted the Israelites gone. In fact, he ordered them out of Egypt. And God went with his people. And that's, we're going to pick it up now, as God brings his people out, the crossing of the Red Sea, and God provides for them in the wilderness. So you were to work through this lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you read those chapters.
Yeah, I did.
Why did Pharaoh and the people of Egypt want the Israelites to go? Ethan.
Because the longer they stayed, the more plagues there would be, and they'll all die.
Yeah, they were worried that if the Israelites stayed, everybody was going to die, huh? So they wanted the Israelites to go. They didn't have time to make bread with yeast. Because you put yeast in the bread dough and you got to let it rise for a while, huh? It takes time. So the bread that they made was unleavened bread. What's unleavened bread like?
A cracker.
Yeah, I suppose it's
not
kind of like...
fluffy.
It's not fluffy. You can say it's just flat, huh?
Thick.
So it would be somewhat like a cracker.
That says weird.
Oh no, I just failed.
Wow. Well, is it?
And what did the Israelites receive from the Egyptians when they left? Ethan.
Silver and gold.
Silver and gold and clothing as well. Remember, God had promised that you will plunder the Egyptians when they leave, and that they, because they were so eager to have them leave because they didn't want to all die, that they gave them money and clothing when they left.
They're just like, we'll be gone.
Yeah, like get out. How long had it been since Jacob's family arrived in Egypt? Remember, at the time of Joseph, Jacob and his family had come down. But how long ago had that been?
430 years.
430 years.
Yeah.
Holy.
Wait,
Who's counting these years?
God. Then how do we know?
They would have been keeping track of
We guessed.
some of those things.
A great guess.
Well, there were 7 years between each one, right? It's like
You use 530
50
years.
years old right now.
No,
You take
I'm
care of them and keep adding.
We know the amount of years.
How is it
that
exactly?
Because they
discovered
counted.
America. That's
How is it
about
exactly
430 years.
They counted.
Okay.
Yeah.
430.
How did God make his presence known to the Israelites as they traveled? So now they're leaving Egypt, group of a nation of maybe 1 million people, and they're traveling out of Egypt. And how does God show that He's with them?
A pillar of cloud. Of dust.
Pillar of cloud in the day, and what did He look like at night then?
Fire.
Fire. Pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. So during the day, there's this big cloud in front of them that's leading the way. At night, there's fire there. And so that was a sign of God's presence with them.
So they would just see a fire at night randomly.
Big pillar of some kind.
yeah,
That would have
that's
gone
what's in
in.
that picture.
What if somebody ran into him?
Guys, you can see the picture on the
Well, you'd have been able to see it. You wouldn't have. And they would have, in some way, God made it known that was Him leading them. It was obvious.
Bunch of moving piece of fire.
Yeah, I think you know, Moses, when God had called him, how would He called him? Burning bush. And what happened to that bush?
It
It didn't burn up. So that was something special. Here, you'd have this big pillar of fire, and you know what's burning, and it just move ahead of you. You kind of recognize, well, that's God leading us, huh? And Moses would have made that known to the people, and this would have been something special again. And I suppose fire, because at night they would have been able to see that, huh? It was bright cloud during the day, they'd have been able to see. Now, what was the problem they ran into after leaving Egypt?
The Pharaoh's army came after them.
And where were they? How come that was such a problem?
By the sea.
Yeah. Ethan, you want to add something to that?
Stuck with the Jordan River.
Nope, not the Jordan.
It's
the Red Sea.
Some of the river.
Yeah. So they leave Egypt and they travel kind of southward, and you have the map there, down towards the Red Sea, and all of a sudden Pharaoh decides, what did I do? I let all my slaves go. And so we see the hardness of Pharaoh's heart here, huh? Even after all that has happened, now he decides, maybe I shouldn't have let them go, and so he sends some of his army after them to round them up and bring them back. And so now the people are worried, because now on one side we've got the Red Sea, on the other side we got Pharaoh's army coming, and they wouldn't have been military and soldiers, and even those who were trained would have been small in number, and you've got women and children and all your animals and everything else. You're not really set to fight a battle, certainly not against a powerful army like the Egyptians would have been. And so what was God's solution to Moses to save his people?
Part the Red Sea.
God parted the Red Sea, huh? And allowed them to pass over on dry ground. So God parted the water of the Red Sea. Moses was to raise out his staff, and God sent a wind that parted it and dried up the ground, and they were able to cross on dry ground. So you have kind of a picture of that there.
There's still a Red Sea.
How
There's
did
still a Red
Moses
Sea.
get over there then? He
Well,
had to
Moses-
just hold it up and walk through?
Moses he walked through, yeah, maybe he had to have his arms up. Because when he got back, well, we'll get to that in number 9. So what truly amazing, not only the Red Sea parted, but how completely God worked the miracle. The ground was not even muddy, it was dry. Because what would have been the problem if it had been muddy, mucky ground?
They're gonna stop.
It would've
It's
It'd be hard to walk. Think of if you got small ponds or something that dry out in the summer. How long does it take that mud sometimes on the bottom of that to dry up, even if the water dries up?
years.
Sometimes it can take a long, long time, huh? Or you think of the rivers where you get some flooding, and then even though the water's no longer there, you still have all this mud and muck that's there for a long time. Well, here, just overnight, not only did the waters part, but it all dried up. God was obviously in control. So it had been difficult, slow to go through, but God dried it up.
Oh. I accidentally put stuff in the wrong spot. So.
And how did God then finally completely rescue his people from Pharaoh?
He healed
Closed the sea on them.
Closed the sea. So now all the Israelites, including Moses, get to the other side of the Red Sea. And here comes Pharaoh's army, their chariots and however else they were pursuing them. And they get out there towards the middle, I suppose, or somewhere along the way, and God
That's really
sends
deep in the middle.
sends it back. And it was deep enough anyway that it was able to kill them all, that they drowned, and that pursuing army is gone. And it was weakened Pharaoh's army. It wouldn't have been every last soldier of the Egyptians that would have been pursuing the Israelites, but it certainly would have weakened them enough now that he's not going to pursue them anymore. He's going to be done with them. So walls collapsed on Pharaoh's army, so they drowned. Ethan.
Wasn't Pharaoh leading them?
Pharaoh wasn't leading them.
Oh, Pharaoh.
So Pharaoh himself, it seemed, died. But certainly, the pharaohs generally didn't lead their soldiers into battle. They would have sent their general and some of his army.
If they let it, then they had a chance of dying.
Elena?
Would you be able to look over and see all the fish swimming around in the sea?
I don't know if you'd have been able to do that, and I don't know. I mean, the water was apparently high enough, that it was on either side. So I don't know if you'd have been able to look into the waters. I don't know just how clear those waters would have been. Been kind of strange. I suppose it's been like going through an aquarium, huh?
Yeah.
Where you got the wall,
But
water and
just
glass
like
on
you
either
touch the
side.
water and it'd just be some water.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd have been able to do that, or if
Stick your hand
There's
through
like a
it and
wall.
then take it back
there was
out.
a wall that you couldn't.
Base.
And I suppose too, be kind of strange, huh? You might not want to do that either, huh?
I'd be nervous, like it's just
Be
gonna
kind of
collapse
nervous
on you.
that it's going to be, and I suppose when now you're receiving instructions from Moses from God what you're supposed to do, when you see those things happen, you'd probably be inclined to listen, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And so if you were told, no, don't touch the water when you go through, I don't know if they were told that, you might not have done that. Kingston.
Why, if it didn't collapse on Pharaoh, why does it say though God collapsed the walls of water on Pharaoh?
And his
And his
army.
Because Pharaoh
So,
is
like,
now relying to his general.
Well, it was Pharaoh's army. He was the ruler. He was very much in charge as king. Even if he wasn't personally there,
It's still
it was him. It was still certainly affecting him.
Have your army be gone.
Yeah.
You can't fight anything.
So certainly Egypt, through all of this, would have been greatly weakened for a long time. Now, that area, you look on the map there on page 50, notice this wilderness of Shur, wilderness of Sin, wilderness of Sinai. This was not necessarily an area that you're going to find a lot of vegetation and a lot of food and a lot of water. You ever been out to, say, the Badlands in the Dakotas?
Uh-huh.
That's kind of what this area of the Sinai Peninsula is like. So now imagine if you have 1 million people trying to live there. How easy is that going to be to find enough supplies for them?
Not easy.
Not easy. Just to find enough water is going to be pretty difficult. But we're going to see God provides for them. Huh? So very quickly they realize, even though they would have brought food with them, there weren't enough supplies to travel all the way through that area. And God, through some miracles, provides for their needs. So as they journeyed away from Egypt, what did the Israelites fear? What was going to happen to them?
Gonna run out of food.
They were going to run out of food, so they were afraid they were going to starve to death.
They would starve to death.
And you think of that, you're going to load up your supplies and all that you're going to take with. how much food are you going to have? Maybe a few days worth, huh?
Yeah.
If that. And again, you're leaving quickly, so you don't have a whole lot of time to go and gather supplies. So they didn't necessarily have a lot of food, and they were afraid they might starve to death. What was the way they expressed their fear, or why was the way they expressed their fear inappropriate?
They
But they didn't trust God.
They didn't trust God. They complained. They grumbled. Huh? They said, "Why did you bring us out here, Moses, to die? At least in Egypt we were sitting around eating. We had food to eat. Out here we're going to starve to death." It was bad being a slave, but being a slave and being abused is better than starving to death. Was there any reason for them to fear or to grumble and complain? No, I think God had just shown His power, hadn't He? Oh, not only with the plagues, but they crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. Pharaoh's army is destroyed. Do you think maybe God can provide for you?
Yeah.
Probably, huh? But they failed to trust Him. How did God promise to provide for their needs?
He Twilight they ate meat, and in the morning they were filled with bread. Yes. No. Yes.
Yes, He was going to provide meat in the evening, bread in the morning. Emma.
I feel like it would be like, say what He provided in the morning first instead of what He provided in the evening.
I would have provided bread in the morning and meat in the evening.
That's what it is. He provided meat.
Oh.
I know, I thought it was bread in the
I
I
read
thought
it
it was meat in the
backwards.
morning and bread in the
It was meat before they went to bed, and bread for breakfast, like toast.
I suppose nutritionally, and I don't know just what the bread was like, but after you get done exercising and working, you want protein, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, they're going to be walking much of the day as they travel, packing up their camp and moving from spot to spot. So in the evening, they need the protein. In the morning, as you get ready to work, and you do that, you want more of your carbs, huh? Bread is more of your carbs, aren't they? So I suppose the reason God provided one in the morning, one in the evening, shows God understood how their bodies worked, and He's providing kind of what they need. So we see God's wisdom in the way that He provides that, don't we?
Yeah.
Was God faithful to His promise?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, He did exactly what He promised.
Yeah.
You can just put yes down there probably.
Could be your mom's. I just stole it.
The Hebrew phrase that in English is translated, "What is it?" has been translated into English as manna. That's what they called the bread that appeared on the ground in the morning. Manna. Because they didn't know quite what it was. What does it tell you about the bread that God provided for His people?
No one knew what it was?
It was special. It was something new that they had never seen before. Yeah. So imagine getting up in the morning and you go outside your tent,
They had
and here's these pieces of bread all over the ground that you can pick up and eat.
Would you eat
Does that exist still?
No, this was something special that God did for His people
Like,
just
how is
during
it
that,
different?
that period of time.
Ours is homemade.
And it was... So God's provided food for them. Now as they continue to travel, now they've got bread and meat to eat. What was the next problem that they faced?
Thirst.
Thirst, yeah. So now they come to areas where there isn't any water. And of course you can't live very long without water. You can go a while without food, but you can't go very long without water.
It's really miserable.
Isn't it like 3 days?
Maybe
Water's just like it's
Once again, what was the problem with their request?
They didn't trust God.
They didn't trust God. And again, they grumbled and they complained. And in this case, not only complained against God, but really complained against his leaders as well.
Against God.
When are we gonna have a test?
Oh, jeez.
Week of Thanksgiving, I think.
I'm not gonna get 32 wrong this time.
So a test will,
The weekend?
Yeah, I got
The week of.
just last time.
so we'll do it that, if you come in that Wednesday, we can do it that Wednesday, otherwise.
Wait, what do you mean you won't get 32?
You got 32.
I got 32 wrong last year.
So that's just a
I
couple
did
weeks.
better than her.
And that was
last
a
year.
C.
I got
Hey, everybody got that?
I did better than you.
How did God provide water for the people?
The rock was from, or the water was from a rock by Horeb.
And what was Moses to do
Hit it.
to that rock?
Hit
Hit
with his
it.
staff.
So Moses was to take his staff, he was to hit the rock, and
It cracks and there's water.
water comes out of it.
But he wasn't supposed to hit it.
No, he was hit it nice and gently, not like whap.
Maybe these the holes with the
Well, I suppose what was the problem here with Moses?
He was angry.
He was angry, and he showed his anger as he did that. But he was supposed to go up and hit the rock with his staff, not in anger, and not,
Tap it.
I suppose, like tap it, not go up and, I suppose he was mad and, oh, you people, you keep grumbling, complaining, But no, he was supposed to go up and, so that
Did the water
demonstrate
just go over the
that.
ground then?
I don't know, it came up out of the rock, I suppose, like a fountain
Or the rock.
sort of thing, and flowed down there and flowed down into the ground, and the people could go then with their,
and then boil it. so
with
have
whatever
clean
they
water.
had and
I wish that existed.
keep it out. And,
If I'm thirsty, I'll take out my tap
And it's
tap.
never
You're over on that
Yeah.
plate.
Let's go the water bottle.
I mean, there's springs in places in the world that kind of flow up like that, but you don't just all of a sudden have no water and no spring there and go up and hit the rock with a staff, and all of a sudden now you've got a spring flowing full of water. But that's what
Just
happened.
like-
God provided for that. So God had Moses hit a rock with a staff, and water came out of it.
God had Moses.
Oh, jeez.
They should have just done it so everybody could just grab like a rock and just hit it on the ground so they each had their own rock instead of.
When the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron about food and water, what did Moses say they were actually doing? Who were they actually grumbling against?
God.
God, yeah.
They were actually.
Who has placed those leaders
God.
in a position over us? God has. Or we might think of our parents as well. Who is God, or who has given us those
God.
parents? God has, huh? Ethan.
Wait, so when we impeached that one president a few years back, was that sinful because he
Oh my God, I
placed
saw
him
that.
above us?
Well, if the individual has done something wrong and against the law, and the law calls for that, that's something different, isn't it? But what if we decided we didn't like the president, and so we decided we were going to rebel and we were going to go grab him and drag him out of the White House and get rid of him? Would that be proper?
No, we can't do
No.
that.
Just like
No.
when people trying to impeach people are trying.
If they've done something wrong, something criminal, something that's against the law, and there are means to address that and take care of that, then that's one thing. It's another thing if we decide we don't like him, even if he would be a wicked and corrupt ruler. Do we, as the citizens, have the right to go and do that?
No.
No, that's not our position. And so, instead, what are we to do with those who are in a position of authority over us?
Honor, praise, and thank, and love,
Yeah,
and
honor,
respect.
respect,
And serve.
And
serve. Yeah. So God provides us with His representatives in our homes. There we think especially of parents. In the church, I think of pastor, would be Sunday school teachers and in those positions as well. And government. We think of all the different levels of government, all the different positions. And what are we to do? Well, speak positively and respectfully, listening to and obeying them in love.
Honor, serve.
So I think even some of the negative talk about whether it be the president or other rulers, is that really proper for a Christian?
Okay,
No.
speak positive.
No. We want to work to build them up. Again, we in this country maybe have a special blessing that if we don't like some of our leaders, or they aren't doing a good job, or we see them being wicked and sinful, we can work to get rid of them, can't we? Through elections. And we might work against them in elections so that somebody else gets elected. There are ways that we can do that. But even as we do that...
What if they're making us do something bad?
Well, then we technically don't have to listen to them. The most listening to them.
Look at this later on, but what's the one time, I suppose, that we could disobey those who are in authority over
They're
us?
making us go against God.
If they're making us go against God. Huh? But if they're just bad rulers, they aren't doing a good job, they're maybe wicked and evil, does that give us the right to take matters into our own hands? Does that give us the right to rebel?
No.
No. And any time we do, who are we ultimately rebelling against? God. And the fourth commandment just reminds us of that, huh? Here it speaks specifically to our parents, honor your father and mother, but ultimately that applies to what? To all those who are in authority over us. And so look at the meaning. We fear and love God, huh? Again, it's God who's put them over us. And so because of our love for God, we aren't to dishonor or anger our parents or others in authority, but, and as you said, honor, serve, and obey them and give them love and respect. So think of it, not just that I serve them and that I obey them, but that I respect them. Even does that? What if they don't deserve my respect? Because again, they're bad rulers. Do I still need to give them my respect? Yeah, because God's placed them in that position, and due to that office, we give them that respect. So, not easy to do, is it?
No.
Especially when those individuals over us are not Christian, and are not living as Christians, and are not ruling as Christians. But who ultimately do they have to answer to? God. And so we leave that in God's hands. We also see in this account that God provides for us. In the Lord's Prayer, we pray for our daily bread. What is that?
Everything we need.
Daily faith.
It's everything that we need to live. Daily bread really refers to everything we need to live. So as you look at that list there in the fourth petition, what is meant by daily bread? We have those things, huh? Food, drink, clothing, shoes, shelter, huh? House and home, money so we can buy those things, family, friends, all those things that we need and enjoy so that we can have physical life. And where does all of that come from? Who provides all of that, Emma?
God.
God does, huh? Now, here in the case of Israel in the wilderness, God provided those things in miraculous ways, didn't He?
Yes.
Bread just appeared on the ground in the morning.
Yeah.
Water comes out of a rock after Moses hits it. How does God generally provide for us?
Walmart.
How are you able to get things from there?
Money.
How do you get money?
Jobs.
Work. And I suppose we might sum all that by saying God provides generally through natural means, doesn't He?
Yes.
He gives us abilities so that we can work and earn some money so we can buy what we need. He causes the sun to shine and the rain to fall so the crops grow so that there's food. So normally he does that through natural means, but he could provide through miracles if he wanted, as he did for the children of Israel.
He's a frog.
God promised to provide for the Israelites, and he did with manna and quail and water from the rock. God also promised to provide for our needs. We can be sure he's going to do that because he's promised. What's the difference between providing for our needs and providing for our wants?
Needs we need and wants we want.
No, needs is stuff we need to survive. Wants are things we don't
Would be nice.
Like an Xbox controller?
Is God going to
Like a 3D printer?
Is God going to provide for all of our needs?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Is he going to provide for all of our wants?
No.
No. He often gives us many of those wants,
Like at Christmas time?
like at Christmas time. Or look at that. 2. Need. Do you need clothes?
Yes.
Yes. Do you need a different change of clothes every day?
No.
No.
Technically, you don't
Technically
need
not, do you?
clothes.
Well, you need clothes. You
Well, I
don't
think
need
this time of year you need some clothes
yeah,
because it's going to
during
be
the
pretty cold
summer,
walking
Yeah, but a
outside.
blanket is technically not clothes.
But there. So God provides for our needs in that way very richly, doesn't he?
A blanket is
Do we need food?
Yes.
Yes.
Doritos, no.
Yeah. Do we need Doritos? Do we need
China buffet, yes.
do we need all these special foods? No. No. We need the basics. And again, God not only provides for our needs, but in providing for our needs there, he often provides for our wants and provides for those needs very, very richly. So he doesn't always give us everything we want, though, does he?
No.
And sometimes what we think we need is really a want, isn't it?
Yeah.
But God promises to provide for us, and he does. So God's going to provide for every need, but probably not for every want.
Yeah, a school is a want, so I don't need that.
A school is a need.
The school's a need.
No, it's
School
not.
is awesome.
I know how to speak English already. I think I'm fine.
Yeah, but who taught your parents to get English?
Their parents.
Then who
Their
taught
parents taught them. And
Yeah,
their
who was the
parents
first
taught
person
them.
that
Hey, you got that down,
God
Kingston?
taught their parents.
Yeah, but you wouldn't
Who's the
know
first
fancy
person that taught the
words if it wasn't a teacher in school, and then you wouldn't get to sound smart.
Yeah.
School is not a jail. It is
A prison.
Everybody have this down.
It's a Nazi military base.
It's
That's
a
what it is.
detention.
no, it's not. It's
We don't need to read up.
Once they left Egypt, how did God rescue his people from Pharaoh's army?
a sea. Parting the sea.
Parted the Red Sea and then drowned Pharaoh's army in that sea.
What?
He partied the Red Sea and then drowned it.
I almost said he partied.
I thought that's what he said, so I said partied.
He
Drowned
partied
Pharaoh.
the Red
Is
Sea.
drowned a
Drowned?
word? Drowned?
It's
Yeah.
drowned.
Because you can't say drowned.
Drowned.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Drowned it.
Drowned.
Wait, I'm not finished.
Drowned, dude.
Sea.
Drowned.
Took in.
I mean, it's not spelled any different, so drowned it.
You ain't be tooken nothing.
Yeah.
There.
Took it.
How did God provide food and water for his people in the wilderness?
A
Magic!
and meat.
Moses.
And water from a rock.
I think
Bread in the morning, meat in the evening, water from a rock, miracles. So, through miracles.
You got that word for word.
I
He's got
wonder
an answer.
why. That's his memory work all week long.
He's got an answer book right there.
That's
Yeah, I
Sunday
know.
school,
I'm
you
joking
have that.
around.
Don't-
Get my sarcasm.
Yeah.
Get her to our
Got it down, Emma?
Yeah, I'm grabbing my pencil. Oh no, I don't. Wait, you do. Yes, I do.
Sorry. You're like, I have 5 sisters.
How does God provide for our needs today?
Through the thing. It's like, Bible.
Through
Through natural means.
Through natural means. And what does he give to us? How much of what we need does he give?
All of it.
everything.
Gives all of it. So he gives us what we need. It says most often through our families, but you might say through natural means. Huh?
Magic.
Oops.
He could use miracles, couldn't he?
Yeah.
We could simply sit down at night for supper and say a prayer, and God could have something appear there on the table.
That would be cool.
Oh no.
Then I
But-
would
would
have
be
to go in the
cool.
hassle of cooking something.
But God
And having mac and cheese.
provides generally through natural means.
God, give me mac and cheese.
Chocolate.
I don't like
No, not working. I need ice cream.
Yeah, it's so good.
Ice.
Like all my
Dessert? No.
Oh,
God,
we're still on the
dessert.
same
Yeah, I gotta go to the next one. Still like good. We get through like technically we get through two.
dessert like in pizza.
I just realized that. And we have not
Third, you
done
get that.
God uses people to tend. We got 20 minutes.
Okay, after God again brings them out of their slavery in Egypt, rescues them from Pharaoh's army, provides for their physical needs by giving them bread and water.
Where you got that? The Ten Commandments.
He's now going to give his people
Commandments and rules to follow.
his word in the form of the Ten Commandments and other laws and ceremonies to protect them and to keep law and order, and ultimately to point them forward to the Savior. And you look back on page 50 again on that map. There's a map there.
Oh yeah.
Hey, you see where they crossed the Red Sea? More than likely up in that area. And then you see where Mount Sinai is, down at the bottom of that peninsula. And they travel down there. And when they arrive there at Mount Sinai, now God is going to speak to the people. God is going to meet with Moses on the top of that mountain and give them a summary of his law that's found in the Ten Commandments. And those Ten Commandments are really, some of them I think we've already had and we've memorized. And you'll be working on some of the other ones coming forward.
Are you
Okay.
kidding me? They could have just gone like this and then gotten straight there and not had to cross through there.
No, but it's all desert, so they had to.
Some of that, God led them down that way because of other nations, warrior nations that were along the seacoast. And again, here you have a group of women and children together with flocks and herds and people who aren't trained in military. You would have had very few men even that would have had, they were slaves. So how much did they know about fighting? How many weapons did they probably have? Probably wasn't a whole lot. And so God, instead of bringing them up there and getting them into a battle right away as soon as they leave Egypt, he leads them down there. Plus he also has this other purpose in that he's going to meet them there and give them his law. But as we've already seen, what did the Israelites do as soon as problems came? They complained. So if God immediately said, we're going to go to war against these people, what do you suppose the people of Israel would have done? They probably would have complained. They probably would have wanted to run back to Egypt again. Huh? So again, we see God working to do what's ultimately best for his people, isn't he? Okay. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 20 then.
No, I'm a book smart.
Why?
Jalen, where's your book? I'm gonna guess I have to find it for you.
Exodus chapter 20. Second book of the Bible.
No,
Second book of the Bible. Try to find it first.
You can find it. You're not lying. You can find it. Don't do it for her.
I'll do it if she needs help.
She has
It's the whole including the index.
Okay,
That's not the whole
Wait,
Bible.
And the concord.
I mean, that is mine.
You're way too far.
Just to the last page.
Do the right.
Got it.
Exodus. See, Exodus.
What verse?
This number.
We're going to start with verse 1.
Oh, 16. These are. Oh, mine is like
Okay.
1,000.
Let's go.
Elena, what'd you start reading there?
And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery.
Let's just pause there. How does God introduce the Ten Commandments now? What does he remind them of?
I am
He
the
is the
Lord your
Lord.
God
Who did what?
Brought you out of
brought you out of
Brought you on a, why would God remind them of what he had done for them before he tells them what they're to do?
slavery.
They were complaining.
So they
that they
listen.
knew it wasn't the devil.
So they listen. What would be their motive in listening then?
So then they don't have to go back to Egypt.
It's a hectic.
Because
God's already delivered them, huh?
Yes, queen. Because they.
I don't know.
Somebody rescues you and does something special for you.
Yes.
What do you want to do for them?
Do that.
Suck up.
You want to show some love for them, huh?
Yes.
And in fact, God's saying, here, I delivered you from your slavery in Egypt. I'm taking care of you. Look at all I've done for you. And now, here's how you can show your love for me. And he's going to speak the commandments. So, God doesn't want us to obey his commandments out of a sense of, well, we have to, huh?
There you go.
But he wants us to obey those commandments. You paying attention, Daylin? He wants us to pay attention. He wants us to pay attention. He wants us to follow his commands as a way to show our love for him. And so God begins by first of all telling them or reminding them of what he's done in bringing them out of slavery. Continue on then, verse 2, Elena.
You shall not.
Or verse 3 rather.
You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your
Follow along and
animals,
pay attention.
nor any foreign residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
Okay, let's pause there. What did God tell them first of all was not to do?
Misuse.
Not to have any other gods. Huh?
Yeah, you can't bow down
No.
to it.
And that included then, don't take some wood or stone and make a statue that you're going to bow down to. Don't bow down to anything else. Don't worship anything else.
Just steal.
And
Steal.
what does God say about himself there in verse 5? What kind of God is he?
He's
A jealous God.
A jealous God. Usually we think of jealousy as being something bad, don't we?
It's like,
What does it mean when you're jealous?
You want something.
Like,
You want something someone else has.
yeah.
What if, though, that something that you want is something that rightfully belongs to you? Is it wrong to want that?
No!
No.
No.
So, worship of
That's
God.
fine. You steal, give back.
Quiet kids and pay attention. So, worship and honor and the glory that belongs to God, is it right for him to be jealous and to want that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he's the only God, isn't he?
Yeah.
So he has a right to expect that. So if a person has a right to expect that,
He still got it.
that jealousy isn't necessarily in and of itself a bad thing. We might think of husband and wife.
The kiss I want.
Do they have a right to expect a certain affection and love from their spouse? And if that spouse is giving that love and affection to someone else, do they have a right, I suppose you might say, to be jealous?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be wrong for
That's their kissing.
for that spouse to give that type of love and affection to somebody else who's not their spouse.
It's not very ethical
That's kind of the picture we have here of God being a jealous God. He has the right as God to say, I'm going to be number one, and you're not to worship anything else or anyone else. So that's the first command that God gives. What's the second commandment that God gives?
Shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God.
Don't misuse the name of the Lord your God. What's God's name?
God. As far as we know.
What's all involved in a name?
A lot. First name, middle name, and last name.
God, God, and God.
I know some
No.
of you just know.
When you
I'm so smart.
hear a name like George Washington, what do you think about?
He
I've
is
got
a
some
president.
wig and
L-N.
Can you maybe think of the pictures you saw him? You think of what he did?
A founding father.
A founding father. But you think of all the things that he accomplished and did, and his position. Or if you think, and then most of that ends up being very positive, doesn't it?
Yes.
You know, if you hear a name though like Adolf Hitler,
Oh, that is not good.
just the opposite, doesn't it? You think of all the evil that was done
But you recognize
by him or that he saw to.
Lincoln?
He's George Washington.
When you think of the name, you hear the name of your friend, do you just think, oh, well, that's that person and this is what they look like? Or do you
That's
think
my
about
friend.
their personality and what they're like and you know, you think of all those other things, don't you? So when you think of God's name, don't just think, well, it's Jesus or it's Father or it's Holy Spirit, but it's really everything God tells us about himself. So God's name includes the fact that he is a just God who punishes sin. It also includes the fact that he's a loving, gracious God who forgives for Jesus' sake. He's an all-powerful God who provides. All of those things are really part of God's name. And so we're to show proper honor and respect in those titles that refer to God, not to misuse them. Third command he gives.
Honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
Honor the Sabbath. What's the Sabbath day?
The day of rest.
The day for you?
Sabbath was a day of rest. It was Saturday for the Old Testament Israelites, and it was to be a day devoted to the Lord then. They weren't to do any work. How come we don't do that?
Because Jesus already died for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was to picture for them the rest of forgiveness of sins that we have in Jesus, and ultimately then the rest that we have in heaven as a result of that forgiveness. So the first table of the law, those first 3 commandments, who do they deal with? Our relationship with who?
God.
Our relationship very directly with God. Now, the rest of the commandments, the second table, commandments 4 through 10, don't deal so much with our relationship with God as it is with our relationship with other people. Emma, continue on, verse 12.
20.
12?
12,
Okay.
chapter 20.
Excuse me.
Honor your father and mother that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. That you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving to you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or
Kingston, are you following
maidservant,
along?
or his ox, or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Keep going.
When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die.
Verse 20.
Moses said to the people, Do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning.
So the second set of commandments. Honor your father and mother. Don't commit murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't give false testimony. Don't speak badly of your neighbor. And don't covet. All those things deal with our relationship with other people. And murder, what also would be a breaking of that commandment? Not just killing somebody, but
Hatred.
hatred even. Hurting them. Adultery. Not just that person has sex with somebody who's not their spouse, but lust. Was pornography, those type of things would be a breaking of that commandment. Coveting, what's coveting? Kingston, what's coveting? Ethan?
Wanting something that doesn't belong to you.
Wanting something, I suppose you might say, wanting something you can't have. So something that doesn't belong to you that you can't have. And so it's really a lust for things, a desire for things. If my neighbor, let's say, restores classic cars, and he's got a car that he rebuilt, and I really want it, and I go offer to buy it from him,
He says, nope.
is that necessarily wrong?
No.
No. If he says, no, I've been out here with my son working on this for the last few years, and it's really special to us, and I'm not going to sell it, and I continue to be, and I'm upset, and I continue to want that, is that now wrong?
Yes.
Yeah. Now that's become coveting, huh? Now it's really a sinful desire for something that I can't have. So just wanting something isn't necessarily coveting, but if it's a sinful wanting for something I can't have, now that's coveting, that's a sin, and God forbids that. Kingston.
What if you and somebody shared something, and then they took it with them when they left somewhere, and then they had it and you want it back, and they tell you they're not getting rid of it, and but still wanting that being wrong?
I suppose it depends upon just what if you want it and you can't have it, it's something you shouldn't have for whatever reason.
It's something
that if it's something that you share with that person and now you want it back because they took it. I suppose if it's something that was shared and that you should still have at least partial possession of, ultimately they're kind of guilty of stealing, aren't they, from you? So that wouldn't necessarily be. But if I want something and I let it affect me in negative ways, maybe even that now, say I decide I want to buy something, and so now I'm going to work every Sunday that I can to get overtime, and I'm not going to be able to go to church because I want that thing. Is that a good thing? Is that coveting at that point? Probably, huh? Now it's gone from just wanting it to where now it affects my love for God and His Word. Now I'm no longer showing a proper love for His Word. So again, just wanting something isn't coveting. But now where I can't have it and I continue to want it and it becomes a sinful desire that affects me and affects my other actions, now it's coveting.
Shame. Wait.
So what's that? First table deals with our relationship with God. The second table deals with our relationship with other people. Pretty much 1 through 3 and 4 through 10 then is the second table.
Why isn't it 1 through... Oh, because
and sometimes, notice, does God number which one's number 1 and which one's number 2?
No.
So some churches will actually take that first commandment, you shall have no other gods, and then their second commandment is you shall not make an idol. And so they actually we kind of combine those two, don't we?
Yeah.
And then so they combine the coveting, that you shall not covet your neighbor's house and your wife and manservant, maidservant, and all that. They kind of combine those. We break those into 9 and 10. So that in itself isn't necessarily wrong. You can have different numbering in that way because God Himself. God says there's 10 commandments. Elsewhere the Bible speaks about 10 commandments, but He doesn't number which one is necessarily 1 and which one is 2. And so
we know the first one is
the first one is you shall have no other gods.
Yeah.
Wait, but so you don't know which one is which?
Well, we know where some of them go.
One in the
It seems, doesn't it? In some ways that the idol one is explaining what it means to not have any other gods, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And that with the coveting ones, you have the first part is coveting things, and the second one is coveting people and animals. So there's a difference there. But you could say, well, you have 2 number 1s in a sense that are both emphasizing that, and God's emphasizing that first commandment by giving 2. and that the covenant is joined together then, so you get to 10.
Wait, I wasn't done with our okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay? What parts of the Ten Commandments set God's people apart as worshipers of the true God? Especially those 1, 2, and 3, the first table. Because the second table, really all people recognize those, don't they? How many people have a command, don't murder, don't commit adultery? Pretty much everybody, huh? So the first table that really restricts worship to the true God and no one else is really the one that sets God's people apart.
Yup.
What time is it?
Just about time to break.
How do you do
Look at my cursor.
Ten Commandments weren't simply special rules for God's people. They were blessings for the Israelite and for that society. What was God protecting with the Ten Commandments?
Look at my cursor.
Look at that. What was He protecting, Kingston?
His people.
By saying don't murder, what's He protecting?
Like His people.
Their life, huh?
Yeah.
By saying don't commit adultery, what's He protecting?
People.
I suppose families and relationships. By saying don't steal, what's He protecting? He's protecting people's possessions, huh?
Yeah.
And so those commands were also there to protect God's people and their body and their life. So He was protecting families, property, even people's lives through those commandments.
Everything and everything. I was protecting family.
So like their dogs.
I suppose they're
That's no
don't.
property. That's
I suppose that might come under the don't covet your neighbor's ox or donkey or his or things like that. That would be the dog. That would be animal.
Well, like it's their property, but calling a dog property is insane.
It's family
they
life.
are.
Yeah.
Well, and when you say,
Like, is
when
this
you
gonna be
call
our
a
last
dog
question?
kennel a cage, that's
Guys, we have one more question.
what do you mean?
Hey, we are not and cannot be saved by obeying God's commands. Why not?
Because we're
Do
saying.
you always have no other gods? Or are there sometimes that other things become more important than God?
Yes.
Do you ever, I suppose it says do not murder, and we talk about the fact that means don't hurt and don't
we ever hate
have hate. Do you ever have hateful thoughts towards others, huh? Yeah. Do you ever covet something you can't have? Yeah. So the problem is we can't keep those commands, can we? So they can't get us to heaven. But how are they still valuable for us? What do those commandments do especially? Kingston.
Is there something happening?
Dalen, don't
Gives
give
us
me
guidelines.
Daylin,
Yes.
how do the commandments, how are they valuable for us today then? If we can't be saved by obeying them, what do they show us?
They show us
What we still should do.
And so what do they show us we've done?
Sin.
Not
We've
obeyed
sinned.
it.
And so what do we need
Sin.
since we've sinned?
God save.
We need a Savior. So, well, sins, I suppose, one thing they keep us in check, huh? Those commandments, because if you're threatened with punishment. But especially they show us our sin and our need for a Savior. And then, of course, afterwards, we want to try and live according to those to show God our thanks for His forgiveness. And maybe before we break, notice Israel's response. How did Israel feel that God was speaking these commands to them?
They were scared.
Scared.
They were scared.
Nervous.
And I suppose we can, on the one hand, we can understand, can't we?
Yeah.
Well, think of that. If now you're standing out there in your camp at the base of this mountain, and don't think great big huge 14,000
Hill.
foot peaks,
That's a big ox.
but
Imagine
but something
Moses having to climb
bigger.
that.
But a great big hill, think more of the hills, maybe in the Black Hills type of setting. But you're down there at the base in the camp, and the whole mountain is pretty much obscured by clouds, and you've got lightning and thunder flashing,
Trumpet.
and you've got trumpets blaring, and all of a sudden this voice comes from the top of the mountain booming out these commandments,
The mountain and smoke.
and there's maybe an earthquake going on, a little bit of an earthquake, you'd probably be scared, wouldn't you?
A little bit.
A little bit. So we can understand that. But did they have any reason to be afraid?
No.
Earthquake.
Again, what did God say to begin with? I'm the God who brought you out of Egypt, out of slavery, huh? So did God love them?
Yeah.
Did he care about them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now when God comes to speak to them, they really shouldn't have been afraid and said, Moses, you tell God, you speak to him, not us. No,
They were scared of
they were.
cats.
They should have recognized this is a God who loves us and is